Hello friends, Amy R here with Prairie Paper and Ink, back with another STAMPtember exclusive. Today's collaboration is with Studio Katia, and with all of the limited edition exclusive collaboration sets, these are one and done. Once they sell out, they are not restocked. There'll be more info in the blog post, linked below, etc. So, this is the Grateful Florals stamp set by Studio Katia. A very personal favorite of mine. Love Studio Katia. I have been using her products for years. I always love the STAMPtember collabs she does. They're just, yeah, as soon as I saw this, I was like, yep, love. So I have some Strathmore watercolor paper and I put it in my MISTI and I used my anti-static powder tool on it. And I inked up the stamp with VersaFine Clair Fallen Leaves ink. So just a really dark brown ink. Doesn't make the biggest difference depending on the image you're using. But when I'm doing like fall themed sorts of things, it's kind of nice to use brown instead of black. Again, subtle, but it's there. And then heat embossing. Hence me using the anti-static powder tool. I coated this image with clear embossing powder. It isn't necessary, but for me, it's basically my security blanket when it comes to watercolor. It gives it those raised edges so things aren't running into other things and I don't have to be as patient. So yeah, it's up to personal preference, but I genuinely just, that's habit at this point. So I used Strathmore watercolor paper. I heat embossed my image, and now I'm using my Karin BRUSHMARKER Pros to watercolor this in. These markers play really nicely with this watercolor paper. I've had people commenting about that, and I used to struggle with these when I first got these markers because, you know, they're wonderful and vibrant and all the things, and I had so many issues, and it was the paper. Once I started using this Strathmore paper, I don't know, they play just so well together. Like these markers, of course I've sped this up in editing, but you know, I'm scribbling on all these colors, I'm not moving quickly, and then I bring in my little water brush and they just move. You'll notice sometimes with markers like this, if you are, you know, scribbling onto your watercolor paper and then you go to add water and they're not moving, like it's just soaked into the paper, 99% of the time it's the paper, not the marker you're using. So experiment and see, you know, what's compatible with what. Another tip, if you can scribble, you can watercolor. At least an image like this, it's intimidating sometimes because it looks so busy, but that's actually a good thing because all the detail there, it kind of takes care of it. And I was like, you know, I'm just going to scribble and then pull a color out because that's what I do more often than not, you know? So yeah. And with these, you can also layer. It looked fine as is, but I was just in a mood to go like as intense as possible. Plus I was curious to see what would happen if I added more color. And again, when it comes to fall creations, I like, you know, the jewel tones, the deep, deep colors. So that's what I did. I just kept layering up these colors and then pulling it out a little more with my water brush. And then once I was done, I cut this image out. Super, super simple. So I cut the image out and then I needed to create a background for this. So I pulled out the Tumbling Leaves stencil and some Nina Desert Storm cardstock, and I just taped the stencil into place with some Spellbinders tape. And then I pulled out Twisted Citron, Peacock Feathers, and Rustic Wilderness Distress Oxide inks. There is something about oxide inks on top of Desert Storm cardstock that is like, mwah, chef's kiss. Love it. They play so nicely together. So I just blended these with Simon's blending brushes, just going in, adding them. As is, it looks great, but I found I didn't want it to be so busy. I want, obviously, my main image to really pop. So once I was done blending this, all I'm going to do is just go over it with these blending brushes. Just much lighter hand. I'm not adding much ink, but it just softens it. It kind of moves everything around a little more, tones it down a little bit, doesn't, you know, make it as busy. So that's all I did. Barely swirling my brush into those inks and then just bringing it to the cardstock and kind of swirling around. It'll also pick up a little bit of what's stenciled. These inks take a little longer to dry, but not super long. Like they're not smearing or anything. So blended on those little bits of color. Once I was happy with this, off camera, I trimmed this down to, I think, 3 3/4 by 5 inches, something like that. And then I backed my little Grateful Florals image with Simon's Big Mama foam tape, because it gives it that little bit of dimension that I love, and without too much bulk. So I popped that into place, and then of course I'm going to add splatter. As always, go big or go home. So I put this in my splat box, and I'm going to add some white gouache splatter, which always goes on a little more intense, but the gouache kind of absorbs a little bit of the color, and it softens. And then of course I got to have some shimmer splatter as well. So I've got some Ranger Perfect Pearl powder. So I've put those on my little palette. I add a few drops of water to each, and then I'm just going to swirl these around with my little fan brush. So I'm going to add my shimmer splatter, which I can't even, like, this is like a must-have product for all crafters. I think you need at least one container of Perfect Pearl powder, because it's beautiful. It is just beautiful. So I splattered that, and then I splattered on my white gouache. I'll set that aside, let that dry. Once I have all my splattering done, wash my brush, wipe off my palette, move on to the next thing. So the next thing being the sentiment. So I'm going to use a sentiment from that Grateful Florals stamp set, and I'm going to stamp it onto Simon's Peacock cardstock. This is another chef's kiss. I don't know why I keep putting this cardstock away, and then I for some reason forget that I have it, and then I come across it in my stash, and I'm like, oh yeah, this is the best color ever. I don't know why with just this one specific color I do this. Anyway, I stamped the sentiment with white pigment ink, coated it with Simon's white embossing powder, melted that with my heat tool, and then cut that out as well. So it can be popped up, which is funny because it's like I had to like straighten the cardstock and stamp the sentiment straight. Again, old habits die hard, you know? But once I had it cut out, I popped it into place with Simon's little foam squares. Again, a little bit of dimension. And then for the inside of the card base is a top folding A2 card made from Simon's smooth white cardstock. I'm going to line up this Grateful Floral image again, and I'm going to ink it up with those same 3 oxide inks. But before I stamp it, I'm going to use my blending brushes, and those will, they'll blend the colors together, you know, so you don't have the harsh lines between the colors from the stamp pad. But this will also soften the ink, because the brush is picking up the ink from the stamp, which is perfect for the inside of the card. But as I've said many times in my videos, doing something like this, it's like, ooh, you could do other colors too. This could be a perfect clean and simple card. If you really don't like to color, images like this that do have a lot of detail, you could ink it up with oxide inks, do like, you know, an orange and a brown and like a red, anything really. Blend them together like that, stamp it, add a sentiment, you're done. Another thing I wanted to show, cleaning my stamps. I don't often show it on video because I'm usually like chucking things all over the place, you know, and I get to the cleaning afterwards. But I'm using this little Studio Katia stamp chamois. Love this thing. It's a little microfiber and it's heart-shaped. It's super cute. Along with Simon's cleaner. I just add a couple spritz of that, a spritz of water. That especially helps when you've got the ink pushed into all the little crevices from using the blending brushes. So that cleans it all right up, and then the stamp's good to go. And then last but certainly not least, one of my other, like, everything's a favorite with Studio Katia, but her bling, chef's kiss. I have some moss green pearls, hibiscus pearls, and mango punch pearls. This combo, again, perfect for these colors. Sprinkled several of them all over the card, because why not? They're just meant, it's all meant to be. So once I was happy with the placement of everything, I'm going to adhere it all into place with craft tacky glue using my Studio Katia embellishment wand. I have the purple tip on mine. There's like a bunch of different colors that you can switch it up with, which just is fun. Plus having like a color, it's less likely that I'll lose it. But even then, my supplies like to walk off, and it doesn't help that I chuck them around. But anywho, that was the card. I hope you all enjoyed. As always, there will be info in the description box below the video, supply list, all that good stuff, so you can check it out below if you're interested. Thank you all so much for watching, subscribing, thumbs upping, commenting, all the good things. And I will see you all hopefully very soon in another video. Bye.
Heidi, Simon's mama and founder at simonsaysstamp.com. Thank you so much for watching our video. If you like what you just saw, be sure to press the thumbs up and subscribe to see more great content.